Hello plant friends, my name is Victoria and you're watching Plantastics. Today I'm going to be showing you all of my carnivorous plants. There are several that have gotten quite large. I also have one of my Nepenthes growing on the wall, but I figured I'd show you the ones that are in pots first. So there are two plants that I left outside over winter, and this is one of them, and this is the other one. And something that I was always afraid to do was leave them outside because we do have freezes. This one had water in each pitcher, and each pitcher completely froze with water still inside, and somehow it didn't kill it. So that was kind of cool. Something else is that if you leave them outside and they get a chance to experience winter, they know what seasons are and they're blooming. So I have 3 blooms that I can see here, and I'm sure that there are many more. So this is my Sarracenia, and you can see it's quite large. I honestly really need to put it into a larger pot. So this one, as well as my Venus flytrap, they're in full sun. And this is really great because it's a water reservoir and it has a wick. So there are roots here you can see. So you may be familiar if you watch my other videos that I like these pots for my African violets. There is a fill line here, but because these are marshland plants, you don't worry about it. You just kind of fill it as high as you can with water, and you know, it's a marshland plant, so you don't have to really worry about them sitting in water because that's what they're used to. So this is actually 2 separate plants, and I believe they're of the same variety, even though when I first got them, they were super small and one was red and one was green. And now they're about the same now. Or maybe this one is a different variety. I honestly just grow a lot of things and I don't know what their names are. When I purchased them, they were not labeled. I purchased like a 4-pack. It was a Venus flytrap, the 2 Sarracenia, and then I had a sundew. I unfortunately forgot to water my sundew, so they have perished. But, you know, you live and you learn. So this, I just want to show it to you because it's the most unusual flower that I've ever seen. So I'm just going to open it up. There are several here. See, there's another one. They look like something unreal. So it's got these beautiful little petals, and then we've got a few here. And then if you open it up, which is not opened yet, you can kind of see where the pollen is. So that's where all the pollen is. And it's really cool. So it has this kind of like a little flap thing here, if you can see that. I just think they're really cool looking. And I've never had one bloom before, obviously, but they're really unique. And since it is a carnivorous plant, the blooms are really far from the plant, so that way pollinators get a chance to pollinate and not be eaten. I did a time lapse of this one, and just by looking at it, if you've grown certain types of orchids, you'll notice that their spikes go towards the light. Well, this one had light overhead, but when I pulled it inside, all of my lights were facing it. The strongest light that it was going to get were going to be facing it. And if you notice in the time lapse, the bloom kind of dances around until it finds where the light's coming from. And that's whenever it kind of zeroes in and goes forward. So I was able to get this really cool time lapse. I thought that was really nice. You can see it starts out green, and then as it seems to mature, it turns red. And then it opens up and pollinators get to it. So this one's a really unique one. Now when friends and family come over, they call this the straw plant. So when I was abroad, this entire thing completely crisped up, and they're just like, your straw plant looks dead. And it's really resilient. I believe it had ran out of water when we had the 110 heat index, and they were able to water it and it was able to come back. So in the very heat of summer, I do notice that it gets a little bit crispy. I also have it on concrete. And I like these water reservoirs because mosquitoes can't get into the water and lay their little eggs. So that's why I like these. the most, but I'm going to have to find some kind of an upgrade for this because it is so incredibly large. So that is my Sarracenia. Next is my Venus flytrap, and it also got to stay outside, and it's also in one of these wicking containers. Both of these are really dirty because they are outside, but I'm just going to point out the blooms for you. Now this one has bloomed for me before, but since it was such a small plant, I'd cut the blooms off. Now I just let everything bloom if it wants to bloom. So we're going to point them out. So that's one right there. If you can kind of see it, if it'll zoom in. And there are several others. So there's one. And then there's another one in here. So there are 3. If I point them out to you, they are 1, 2, and 3 right there. You can see that it seems like the more sun they get, the more red their traps seem to become. And these are constantly catching things, which is kind of cool. There's also a tree frog that lived in here last year. It was a baby tree frog, and I got to see it grow up, and it liked being in here because it was wet. Because I water these, I make sure that they stay moist, and he was probably hidden. And I've noticed that a lot of reptiles seem to be gravitating towards these. There's a green anole. She was like the mother anole, I guess. And she laid a bunch of eggs in the backyard. So I had all these cute little babies. So she really liked to hang out on the Sarracenia. And I think it's because the insects are attracted to the plants. So they're kind of benefiting because they're catching some of those flies and whatnot. And with the green anole, she literally blended in perfectly. She looked like one of the Sarracenia traps. So that was really cool. So this one always seems to have something in there. A tree frog, and the other one has anoles. So this is my Venus flytrap. Next is an experiment where I kind of just forgot to feed them, so I don't really know what's going on anymore. But these are 3 identical plants, and I cannot remember the name, but it is a pitcher plant. And the experiment that I was doing at the time was, and I'm still kind of doing it, I just haven't fed this plant in probably 2 months. It's just been getting water and sunlight. And these are a little bit different. So unlike the others, I do not fill the water all the way to the top. I fill it to the fill line. Nepenthes actually don't like to sit in water, so that's something that I try to avoid. And the experiment was that there's 3 plants, and there's always the rumor that if you feed them insects, you'll produce more traps. And the logic behind that, someone explained to me, was that the plant doesn't need as many traps if you're fertilizing, but if it's catching with insects, it'll just need more traps. That's the logic someone relayed to me. And so I have them labeled here. This is the control. So this is the one I never fed. This one here is the one that I fed the Osmocote pellets to. And then the largest one here, naturally, ironically, the control and the one that I fed insects to are the same size. And this one here is the smallest, and that's the one that I fed the fertilizer to. So you can do with that what you will. Honestly, this is not enough information to draw a conclusion because this is a very small sample size. So if you were to recreate this, I would suggest getting multiple varieties and putting them all in the same conditions and doing this for maybe a year. I can't commit to that because I tend to kind of forget. I remember to water always, but I was forgetting to kind of fertilize and whatnot. So this is my Nepenthes, and I'll put the name on the screen because I'm going to have to look at my Etsy shopping history to try to figure out what this one's called. But it has these really bright red traps here, and they look just kind of different. Next are my 2 pings. So I have Ping Pirouette, and it is really pretty. So when I first purchased it, it was pink, and it has since turned green. I was able to propagate from a leaf. I used perlite and some moss, and I was able to get it to a pretty nice size. I kind of just put it with my African violet propagations because that's what I've started putting them in terms of substrate because I had so many fungus gnats. And then here's my pink planifolia. So there is a difference in care, specifically with watering. They're both under my T5 Barrina grow lights in my propagation room. I'm going to give you a closer shot of this one. This is the pink planifolia. As I was saying, so this one likes to be drenched. This one likes to be in a lot of water. Think of kind of like your Venus flytraps or your Sarracenia or some of your sundews. This one likes to be in water. This one actually bloomed for me. It was really cool. And then this one, I do keep some water, but I do not fill it past the fill line because this one will get root rot. And you can see that they're in different substrates as well. This one is in 100% peat moss, and this one is in a mixture of perlite and some soil and some moss. And I also have tree bark in here because I found that you can have a chunky mix, and honestly, you can use lava rocks as well. Instead of buying the little balls, I find that that is way cheaper because you can get a big thing of the lava rocks for $5. So I like to put some kind of something at the bottom. So if I do accidentally overfill it, it's not in contact with the soil and it'll be in contact with that porous mix. There are these, and these catch gnats mostly. You can actually see some. There's not any on this one. But the planifolia is actually really great at catching insects. And she's kind of died back, and I don't really know why that is. And this one seems to be doing the best it's ever done, despite changing colors. But you can see here, there are quite a few gnats trapped on the surface. And each carnivorous plant is so fascinating because, yes, they all catch insects, but they all do it in a different way. So there is one more carnivorous plant that I have not showed you that I'm going to have to take you to, and it's my Nepenthes Gaea. So that is honestly my favorite Nepenthes, and I highly suggest you get a Nepenthes Gaea as your first Nepenthes. I had an Alata hybrid. It's the one that you can find most readily at big box stores and at local nurseries. And I noticed that it had the greatest reaction to humidity changes. In saying that, I mean that the pictures would drop immediately. They would immediately crisp up and fall off. So it was kind of difficult to keep the pictures on that one, even though I have relatively good control of maintaining my humidity with a humidifier. I have since stopped continuously running that humidifier because it was just so humid in here. And the two plants that suffered the most was my philodendron melanochrysum and that Nepenthes alata, which I have since lost. Unfortunately, I had it outside and it just didn't get watered enough. But yeah, so the Gaea I'm fixing to show you, it has these super patterned pictures that just look really cool. Okay, so here is my living wall. And as you can see, I've done a pretty good job at filling it out. Now, a lot of these plants are just going to have to fill in the space. These up top, I put them up top because as a background, you're going to see those. And I put some of the smaller ones where you wouldn't really be able to see. So here you can see, this is my Nepenthes Gaea. And I have it in a mix of sphagnum moss and perlite. And it really does seem to like that. If I move this light here. And then this is my gnat catcher there. Now also, these catch a lot of gnats. And if I find a slug, which I did find one, I've removed all of the, well, there's another one. I brought in that Sarracenia and I put it here for the time lapse, and it apparently had a ton of slugs. So where did he go? Did I drop him? Here he is. Well, he's going to be put into the Gaea picture because he's eating my begonias. So I'm just going to drop them in there. But yeah, they have slugs in them because I put them there because they eat my plants. Well, anyways. So this is the Gaea. And you can see that these are really vining plants. And you can see how long it got. And I have it kind of suspended with these here so it doesn't just flop forward. So you can count the pictures, and it's produced the cutest little baby. Isn't that precious? So precious. I like this one the most because the pictures don't seem to drop as easily, and also because the pictures are just so ornate. Like, look at that beautiful pattern. Now, it does get some sun stressing, and this is what that looks like. So you can kind of see the greener leaves that are kind of facing away, like this one. It doesn't really have any sun stressing, but you can kind of see here the difference because these leaves are kind of covering it. So that's just what the regular leaves look like. And that's what they look like when they're sun stressed. So you can kind of recognize that. So I have several pictures forming. And I had to cut off a lot of these leaves because they just looked really crispy and not very pretty. So you can see there's a whole new plant forming. And this plant also looks to have some branches forming, which is something I've never had happen. So you can see it kind of looks like a horn, but that's the start of a new growth, I believe. Everyone that I saw that had one, theirs weren't mature or old. It looked like they had just purchased them. Now mine, I've had, I want to say for a year. I may have an unboxing on my channel if you want exact dates. I know I've had it at least a year, and it's gotten pretty large. Like, it is kind of curving, but I'd want to say it's about maybe 18 inches to a foot long. And if you're growing one in your own conditions, the length in between the leaves kind of tells you how much light it is or isn't getting. So when they're really small and they're getting enough light, the leaves will stay really close. And you have something called jumps, which I can't exactly remember what they're called, but you'll have these huge kind of leaves coming out. So it does get nutrients and it photosynthesizes like a normal plant, but it kind of substitutes that with the insects. So we're fixing to look into the pictures and see what they have caught. So you can see, obviously there's a slug in there that I put in there yesterday, but there's lots of gnats. So you can see there's just so many in there. If you can see, if it'll focus. Oh no, he lost his hat. Well, he doesn't really need it because it's really just a trap or prevent. Well, you can kind of see those little black specks or the little gnats. I hate that he lost his little hat. Well, it is sad, but we can appreciate it still. So that's the underneath part. There are these little hairs and they secrete nectar around it. So that's the top part of it. And these just keep the water out when it rains. Luckily, it doesn't really rain in here. But yeah, so they secrete nectar along the edges. And here it's kind of like hairs almost, or ridges. And if something comes into contact with it, it will naturally fall in. And then once they're inside, they really cannot get out. I've never seen anything get out of them, honestly. Slugs, snails, whatever it is. The one in my office, instead of feeding it insects, I would normally just feed it the snails from my aquarium because I had so many at a time. Because I was running the light too many hours and I just didn't know to run it for fewer. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. If you like this video, be sure to like it. If you'd like to see more plant videos from my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on that bell notification so you don't miss any videos. Comment which is your favorite. Do you have a favorite carnivorous plant? I don't really know which one I like the most. I like the pings, I guess, because they catch, it seems like, the most gnats. But my gaias have been catching a lot more gnats than I thought that they could. But anyways, comment that below, and I'll be seeing you next time. Goodbye.